Hello and welcome to the Joanne Avison podcast. I'm really excited to be sharing a conversation with you today that I had with the lovely Brea Johnson. Brea is a yoga educator with over 20 years experience in anatomy and movement. She's the famous owner of Heart and Bones Yoga, an online platform globally recognized for offering anatomy-informed yoga, mobility and inclusive movement. And honestly, her yoga is just gorgeous. Now, I think you're going to love my conversation with her. But before we get into it, I just wanted to tell you about a really exciting new development. So I've known Brea for over a decade, I think, and we've worked together before. And I know she's with me when it comes to the importance of understanding fascia. And it doesn't have to take years and years and years of learning theory. So we've decided to create a special short course for you called Beyond Anatomy, the Living Language of Fascia. And we are so excited about it. We cover so many things, including how fascia shapes and supports every aspect of your movement, your being, and how to blend anatomy and intuition into your teaching or your personal practice. So you can take the course anytime, anywhere, and it's open to anyone, whether you're a yoga teacher, an anatomy enthusiast, or just a lifelong mover that really would appreciate being able to move better. And I'll give you more details on the course at the end of this episode. The course links are in the show notes for you. But for now, let's just get back to today's conversation with Brea, because we delve deep into the layers of teaching movement, balancing that intellectual understanding of the theory with somatic experience and embracing the interconnectedness of body, spirit, and life. I really hope you'll enjoy this lovely conversation and get the sense of why I love working with Brea quite as much as I do. And stay to the end, because I'm going to give you a little bit of information about how to access the course, where to find it. I am absolutely thrilled in this episode of the podcast to have my friend and colleague, Brea Johnson. Brea, how are you?
I am so good, and I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I'm still loving your work, and I'm looking at it, and every time I think, oh my God, that's brilliant. And just so glad to have you here. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do, because
Of course, the feeling is mutual, of course, because I love your ability to just, number one, your passion and excitement, it's infectious. And then that passion and excitement about not just movement in the body, but just spirit, life, the interconnectedness of it all. It's just, I love it.
Well, it's a big theme for me because, I've done an awful lot of human dissection. I've spent many, many hours in the lab. And what that's done, Brea, and I think this is something that you just, a word we've already talked about, but you embody in your practice, is that we have our anatomy books. We see the body cut up into parts posthumously. And we have the anatomy books and we have all this anatomy guidelines and what we should and shouldn't be seeing and doing. And it's a very intellectual study, which doesn't make it wrong. It's extremely useful because we know where we are and why we're there. However, you and I both know when you're in the movement classroom, movement is not an intellectual thing. Movement's not an intellectual process. It's a natural performance. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about is, when you're teaching something like, I know you did a recent course about the psoas, you've done a recent course about fascia. When you're teaching about it, how do you balance in a movement context? Because I'm really fascinated, because this is our bread and butter. How do you balance in a movement context the understanding of that without losing your students down that intellectual rabbit hole?
This is a fantastic question. And it's been, I've been teaching for 20 years now. And so it's a kind of a 20 years worth of an answer. It's not something that comes right away. I think that comes with experience. And I think it comes with my own journey of going in one extreme to the other, like going at one point, I think it was back in 2012 when I started to get really disenchanted with the yoga world and all the extreme movements, and just going, well, there needs to be some other way. This can't just be the way that we need to move. And then so I went and did more anatomy courses, and I went outside the yoga world and learned in a lot of ways. So I went down that route for a long time. It changed everything. It made a huge difference in my life. But then it's interesting to see then in the last almost 10 years since that, to kind of swing the pendulum back to just it's like trust. Like we need to have that there's a layer of intellectual understanding that's important. In my mind, it's we always get to the head and then it goes down to the heart, or maybe for some of us it's the heart and then validating the heart's intention and knowledge and the body's knowledge through learning an anatomy. After I've kind of done both ways, but there's so many layers. There's so many layers on that question. So one of the things that when you talked about dissection, so I did a dissection course once years ago with Tom Myers, and and it's interesting because you use that as intellectual experience, but for me also, it was actually one of the most spiritual experiences I ever had.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, right. So even in the dissection room, when you have a body, and to me, that body represented me, it was a mirror for every other person on this planet that I got to see and touch and feel and see the things that as embodied we feel, right? I sense my ribs, I can feel my ribs, but then here I am cutting open the ribs and seeing what's underneath and behind the ribs. And that's so beyond the intellect fundamentally. So I think what it's done for me in my practice over the years of working with different bodies, going on different pendulum swings of, okay, I'm now really going to learn, and it's only this anatomy, and this is the only way we can stand and lift our arms, to like, oh my God, just move in a variety of ways and feel good and bring joy into your life. Like that happens through practice, but fundamentally it happens for me as trust that like, and I going back again to that dissection course, actually, because I went for a long walk after the 5 days, and I remembered all I kept repeating in my mind is like, who are we if we're not this body? Who are we if we're not this body? And yoga often teaches us, right? You are not this body. You have to transcend this body while you're in life. And I'm like, my God, while we're in it, it's everything. And so when I'm teaching other bodies to move, and I'm teaching other bodies about bodies, knowing that we are so much more. And then I think hearing, like, I don't really study neuroscience or anything. I just will listen to the odd podcast and get little dabbles of information. But to me, those little dabbles of information show me and remind me of like the new neuroscience that keeps coming out that to me reinforces, we don't know anything, and we know so much, but we also don't know anything. And so science is always moving forward.
Yeah.
And so thank God. So that gives me permission as a teacher to be like, oh, okay, I don't have to know everything. And so it reinforces that sense of like, we are so much more than the anatomy. We're so much more. We are spirit, we are heart, we are everything. And that is my anchor for teaching. And I hope my embodiment of that as a teacher and as a person comes through without always having to say anatomical language.
Oh, so well said, because, it's like, for me, the anatomy is like the postcodes, and we need to know where we're going. And that's really useful. But what I think has happened in, let's say, 20th century anatomy is that the dissection process was dissecting the fascia away and breaking it down into the component parts. And that reductionist view reduced the human down to the postcode. The being part was under the jurisdiction of the church, we know that, and the body parts were analyzed and quantified when dissection first was allowed and likened to mechanics. So it was explained through that. And yet what we're now doing, without the same religious connotations, we're now allowing ourselves to embrace the spiritual awareness. And I think what we're doing is bringing the spirit back and seeking to unite the expression of each individual, the self, through it. It's very much about bringing the body to a state of stillness so that you can explore, as you said, there's so much more than the body, but that isn't to detach from it. And I think what your work does that I admire so much, Brea, is you you insist in the gentlest and most appropriate way of including what I would call unspecialized movements. So it's not just about that yoga pose and that yoga pose and that yoga pose. I always remember seeing you on Instagram, because I just loved it, was standing putting your socks on. That's always a measure to me of how tired I am, how well I am, how balanced I am. Can I stand and put my socks on? And I remember seeing you doing this as a presentation on Instagram of, your daily movements in and out of a car, and, when you're cooking and stuff like that. And you were just putting your socks on and describing it as a what I call an ordinary movement, an everyday movement. And that's what we actually do. That's how we express ourselves, right? What mood are we in when we get out of bed? How's our body feeling when we wake up? How are we using it? And trying to reduce that down to component parts is like,
Yes, like which now tell me, the relationship between like the calcate like whatever sort of like muscle or bone, and really like how do I engage my glute while I stand and put my sock on? Like getting into that reductionist thing when it's like, well, move more because to me when you're saying that, and I love that because it's true, to me it's like every movement counts, every moment counts, because they're all opportunities for awareness, and that is what our yoga practice is awareness. And my agenda too, a little bit on social media and in life and as a teacher as well, is also deconstructing like the hierarchy, as you point out, of like, oh, well, asana is this, and this is this structured, you can only do this, you can only be a good yoga teacher if you're doing unrolling your mat for an hour and like doing these shapes. When really
very precisely.
Yeah, very precisely. And these are the right anatomical cues. And we are so much more than that, but it's also deconstructing the cultural conditioning. So as you were talking about how anatomy and in the Industrial Revolution, of course, we looked at the body through that lens because that was, the patriarchy. Who were these scientists? There weren't a lot of women scientists just like dissecting bodies at all. They weren't even allowed in the room. So of course we came from this side of things. And so for me, I'm also really interested in sort of that deconstructing and decolonizing our movements and decolonizing our yoga practices and who's our teachers and what do we see and what do we deem okay, or what do we deem as official okay movement. And so it's kind of, in a way, a radical act to have that on social, let's say, of just a video of like, I'm putting on my socks, because then it made that normalize. It made that give us all more permission of all bodies, of all backgrounds and
all genders, all everything. It's such diversity. And it's funny that I really appreciate what you said about the dissection, what you said that you walked in that room and it was exactly the same for me the first time, because the first time I did dissection was with Tom and Todd Garcia. I know that's who you're working with. And one of the things I love about Todd Garcia is the reverence with which you begin the class. It was like a church. It was much more like a church than it was a lab. And I remember working on different ethnicities and having started within 5 minutes of starting the dissection, I was in tears. And I remember a colleague of mine coming over to me and saying, "What's the matter?" And I said, if you look at the skin of a lemon and the skin of a lime and the skin of an orange, the depth of color is like one cell thick. It's just not even there. It's nothing. If people knew this, there would be no apartheid in this planet. There would be total diversity. And I swear to God, Brie, if everybody saw what we got to see, because it's a privilege, those people have donated their bodies to science, and God bless every one of them for giving us that segue to have that insight. I don't believe that we would have issues with diversity or inequality.
Well, God, there's so many layers to that. That would be a part of it. It would be, yeah, well, but I think it's also because I see this showing up a lot when I teach workshops and when I teach teachers of this, because there's still those threads of putting hierarchy on different types of learning and putting a hierarchy on, well, if you know the anatomical language and if you know the anatomy of this, that, and that, then you are going to be a better teacher. And I sometimes get pushback when I really put the emphasis on somatic experiencing and in the sense of like,
absolutely,
how am I feeling? Well, okay, if you want this answer of like, well, how does this muscle relate to that muscle? And then how, like, i.e. a fix, and i.e. you can then talk to your client or your student and sound like you know what you're talking about. And therefore it gives you a sense of validation. When in reality, we are just so much more complex than that. But I think that part of this, I was going to say new movement, but I don't know how new any of this really is, but this intentional movement towards reclaiming movement and reclaiming our anatomy and reclaiming our embodiment through just a full breadth of experience allows us to trust our own wisdom again, allows us to trust our own bodies and trust the unknown and the not knowing, and that we don't need to have that hierarchical. And it still helps. And anatomy is amazing and fascinating. And like, by God, go, if you love it, learn it and do it. But one of the things, and what you said, funny that you mentioned Todd, that was one of the things when I did that course. And Todd's there like, oh, the proximal, distal, above the blah, blah, da, da, da. And like, especially me at that time, I'm like, I don't even, like, I was like, holy crap. And it actually gave me permission because I was like, well, anatomy is an entire language that will take lifetimes to actually learn, to get to the point like that where Todd was and is, of just knowing. And I was like, I'm never going to know that in this lifetime. And in that moment, it gave me permission actually then to be there, because I was having that a total imposter syndrome moment where I'm like, oh my God, everybody knows more anatomy than I do. I don't even, what am I even doing here? And then realizing like, oh, I'm never going to get to that extreme knowledge. And I don't want to get to that extreme knowledge because I just want to help bodies to move and feel better in our life. And so I think that's helpful to remember within that.
It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. And this was a conversation I was having recently with John Sharkey. And John is a clinical anatomist. So he's at another level of anatomical teaching and learning. And what that means is he gets to train surgeons to become surgeons and doctors to become. So it's another level of requirement. And because he has developed European neuromuscular therapy so unusually, he also knows about teaching people manual therapy and medical exercise and movement. And we work, I get to work on faculty there. It's very exciting. And he says to me, this is where he says, I get troubled. A brain surgeon needs a completely different depth and level of understanding to perform some sort of surgery to what you need as a yoga teacher. And this isn't patronizing you. You do not need this number of postcodes because you're working with the accommodation. And this is one of my metaphors, is the fact that we know with a postcode, we haven't got a clue about the accommodation. We need a somatic register to have that feeling. And that's why I love your work so much, because I think this is what you're saying. It's possible to wear a cloak of accurate anatomical precision almost as a substitute for understanding the movement. And it isn't a substitute. It's different. It's very useful. They can be brought together very powerfully. But, we were talking earlier about somebody asking about knowing the weight of the psoas muscle. Or the weight of anything in the body. What difference does it make? How is that person moving it?
Yeah. What's their relationship to that? Can they even sense it?
Yes.
Can they even, do they even have a neurological map to it?
Yeah. So useful to have a neurological map. But at which point do we substitute a true, use your word, somatic understanding for knowing the names of things? Knowing the names of things is very different to understanding how they work. And I know that, we're all up against this, that almost like, are we honoring our students? It's a difficult question, and I don't think it's got a simple answer. Are we honoring our students by hurling all this anatomical reference at them, challenging them with it? Or are we honoring them if they're really embodying their practice and simply understanding the rotational nature of a limb?
Amen. Yeah, I agree. And there's something, you're so right about how subtle that is, how complex it is, and how I wish it was just like 5 easy ways to teach for your people to move. But what I hear when we're saying this is when we get caught up, and this is unconscious for, I think, a lot of us. I don't think a lot of us necessarily even realize that we've had this bias or hierarchy in our own minds towards that anatomical, I like how you said cloak. And then it's important to a point, whatever that point is, and that's going to be a different point for each of us. But
Exactly.
ultimately, if we get stuck there, then it's actually overriding our innate wisdom, and we lose the opportunity to trust our own wisdom, which is what the Industrial Revolution, which is what patriarchy and colonialism and all these cultural conditions like that we are still swimming in have imprinted into us. So it's an act. And what is yoga is a liberation practice. It's a practice of awareness, and the subtle parts of that then we can liberate ourselves and to the radical act of trusting our own wisdom without having some fancy name attached to it, like, well, this is the distal border of the, whatever, vastus lateralis. Like, cool, that sound, you sound really, I felt like really cool when I said that. But but what's even cooler? Trusting my body, feeling my body, being curious about myself, being open, flailing, making mistakes, like watching all these things, like watching myself fall over, learning something new, then doing something that I never thought I could do physically. And then I did it. And then I feel amazing. Like, that's cool, in my opinion. That's cooler than being able to spout really cool sounding anatomy, which is also, again, time and place and cool. But I think my main point that here is just, especially as movement teachers, yoga teachers, the body, like, our wisdom is where the magic lies. And
Oh,
it can be
absolutely.
bolstered by some anatomical knowledge, for sure,
Yeah.
to the point that you even care as a teacher.
Absolutely. And I had a client the other day who's taken up yoga, and he was saying, oh, I feel really bad because I can't fold my feet underneath me. He's got an ankle injury. And I said, you don't want to. And he said, what do you mean? I said, what's happening when you do that? And he said, oh, well, this happens. And he shows me how the ankle twists and he gets uncomfortable, but he's got a lovely teacher who says, only do what you can. And I said, hang on a second. You're not in a competition. I bow to this teacher who's not pushing you to do it absolutely the way that she says or he says. And what I love is that you are finding a way that works for you to do it, because what you're doing is honoring an injured limb. And that's what you do when you're injured. You don't see an injured bird trying to fly as fast as another one. You see them looking after themselves. And it's that inner awareness you talked about. It's that inner sensibility that sometimes we're almost overriding in order to perform a task. And I actually embrace, as you just said, it was brilliant. When I go to put my socks on, Brie, and one foot at a time, and when I can't do it and I go to fall over, or I can't lift my knee, or I'm a bit wobbly, that's such useful information for me. And then I can sit back and think, am I sleeping badly? Am I not as well as I think I am? And, I've been through quite a lot the last 18 months in terms of well-being, and I've had to really give myself permission to be aware of not being able to do so. It's so useful. And discovering that, oh, look, this isn't optimal. What could I do? Get an extra hour's sleep, maybe. Drink more water, whatever it is. It's just not being able to do it is as powerful as somatic information.
Yeah. And how much more powerful would that be for all of us with these imprinted messages that we all inherently have of, like, leaving it at, like, oh my God, my balance is so bad, I suck, or like, that's, I think, for a lot of us, that first unconscious story. And rather than, like, that's just living life and looking at our movement through a sense of curiosity and exactly what you're saying. And rather than, like, and I love the word perform. Thank you for that. And, I didn't perform standing on one leg, putting my sock on as good as I did 2 days ago. And then leaving it at that. But exactly, this opportunity for this awareness, this opportunity to be curious. And then may that give us a feeling of more permission then, and a little bit more ease and less pressure, because there is, I think, so many of us in so many ways have this story, especially around movement, which is so silly. But thus is the world we live in, where it's like, I have to be good at this pose. I have to be good at this mobility thing, or I'm not at this certain weight. I'm not at, like, it's so pervasive. And so look, what care and love do you give yourself in that moment? Like with your beautiful example of, oh, okay, I'm not as balanced as I was 2 days ago, but oh, so it's like you're giving yourself this mothering, this loving care of like, oh, well, what is wrong with me? Like not what is wrong with, like, yeah, have I not had enough sleep? Like that's care and that's love. And that's, to me, I hear that as like nervous system ease and this repatterning and re-nurturing for ourselves.
And I have to say this to you, Brie, because we had a great time last time you were here, and we did that lovely film, and I'm really excited about the one we're planning for this year, because I think we're going to bring fascia integrity into the story, and we're going to start really talking about this, not just what we can do, but giving ourselves permission to discover that what we can't do is just as interesting. And that doesn't mean, I know, yes, exactly. Those of you that can't see Brie, she's just fist pumping the air. That it's like, it's information. It's information. And it's a silly thing. My son looked after me beautifully when I was really ill and I was in a hospital. And he really took care of me. And yet he wanted to see me thrive and very slowly and gradually improve and get better. And each day it was, oh, look, Mum, that was great. You did that and did it. And he was really, really encouraging. And then he wanted to really see me move on. And 6 months, a year later, I was standing in my kitchen and I just said to him, oh, no, I'm not doing that today. I'll do that tomorrow. I don't like driving at night anymore. And he looked at me and he said, Mum, don't talk senile. Really, like, snapped my head off. And I was like, excuse me? And he said, just say you don't want to drive at night today. And I said, what? Sorry? And he said to me, Mum, you can drive at night. Don't say, I don't like driving at night anymore, because if you keep saying that, and every day you've got another thing that's got any more after it, you're going to stop doing things. You're not ill anymore. You're well now, and you can drive at night. And I mean, he really was telling me off, but it was also this desperation that this beautiful young man didn't want his mum to be behaving like his grandmother. And I just stood there and I opened my mouth to get cross. And I thought, he's absolutely right. And I said, you know what? I am well. I am okay. And I said, and I actually don't like driving at night at the moment. Maybe I need to have my eyes tested. And I did need to have my eyes tested. And I needed new glasses because my eyes have actually improved. They've actually improved. So the blurry effect that I was getting at night, as we all get older, we get nearsighted. Well, I'm very short-sighted. So my eyesight's actually improved. So I needed a new pair of glasses and a clean windscreen, and I was good to go. And it was like, hang on a second. I think we can be very self-deprecating. I can't do that. And there's a judgment in there that I should be able to do that. And we turn that into, I can't do that anymore. And it's the language that we're using. And as you said so beautifully, when we take care of ourselves, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't really enjoy the night lights. Maybe I need to get my eyes checked out. And you find out that your eyesight's improved. And then you're really excited. I've gone past my 60th birthday and I'm seeing better than I was when I was in my 50s. Yes. And it's an empowerment. It's beyond self-care. It's self-empowerment. When we get very excited about what we're going to do next, I think we're moving into an age of empowerment where there's permission to be who you are, to express who you are, the way you do, and show up, and not necessarily be perfect.
Ugh, completely.
Or like anybody else.
Completely. I know. And I think about my most simplest answer. Well, first of all, back to your son, wise words. Thank you. The wisdom of your young. Thank you for that gift. And it seems like such a small little example, but like, look how powerful and completely changing that was.
It completely pivoted me, because I got into a habit of looking after myself and being a little bit precious, which is great because I needed to take more care. But I'd gone beyond the point of precious to adding this word anymore. That's all I'd done, Brie. I added the word anymore. Yeah. And we took it out of my dictionary. And
yeah. And that's why I think I always love the word curiosity, because it really opens us up to possibilities and it's so not finite. And actually, even recently, I was doing a course with some of our teacher trainees, and we played with this. So this is something what I love to do in terms of embodiment, exploration, and curiosity, is to look at how different words show up in our body. So we used the word curiosity, and I had us all, we're standing, and it's like, okay, I don't quite remember, but I might have said it like what's the opposite of curious? Like what is like not, I don't know, closed. I can't even remember what opposite word, but it came up with some opposite word. We might have done that first. And it's like, okay, let's say that, repeat that, embody it. How does that word show up? And everybody's, kind of standing. And then it was like, okay, now embody curiosity. How would you stand as somebody who's curious? How does that show up? And then, of course, we do it, and then we debrief it after. And some of that like the power of debriefing, and even just watching as the teacher, like people just like, oh, their shoulders softened. They stood up a little taller, but not in that, like, I'm in good postural habit stance. I'm a little bit more open and receptive. And so I think when we can bring curiosity to all parts of our self, that's the practice and that's the freedom. And that is, I think, hopefully, may it be so, that this is where things continue to go, because again, we get stuck otherwise. And I'm not good enough if I don't know all the anatomy, or I'm not good enough if I can't do this pose. I'm not good enough, when we can see every moment of our life as an opportunity for just curiosity. And that was another thing I was going to say. And one of my other ways that I love teaching about that is balancing poses. So simple. But like, I often tell people, this is the one time I really tell people, like, I don't want you to get good at balancing. Well, actually, ultimately, it doesn't matter what I want for you, but like, don't get good at balancing. Keep challenging yourself. Like, okay, get that tree pose. Cool. Have your moment of like, I'm not falling over. There's a win. But now challenge yourself even more. And I think when we can give ourselves permission not to be good on the yoga mat in a balancing pose, is that microcosm of not being good at everything else we do in our life, because it stops us in so many ways, and it stops that flow of curiosity that can really inform us of a lot about ourselves and our movement, and gives more permission to have wouldn't it be amazing on the cover of the yoga journal if it was like putting a sock on, or like standing there not falling over, instead of some fancy ass pose? Like, we continue to, I think I've been saying that, I've heard that joke for like 15 years, and may it still be true.
I couldn't agree more. And another thing is, we were sitting in the car, and you've got a lot going on. You've got kids in the back, or you're in a hurry or whatever, and you've got your shopping on the seat next to you. And what do? You open the door, you move across, you're still in this car seat, which is not designed for the human spine. And you pick up this heavy shopping and you lift it across your lap to put on the pavement outside you, so you can get out of the car and go, and you've hurt your back and you can't move. I don't care if you can do Warrior 2. I want you not to do that. So yes, understand enough anatomy that you can prevent yourself from being injured.
Yes.
Just enough. But then play. And if people were really listening, I mean, I know you've had this. How many times have you had somebody come into a yoga class and they've got an injury and they say to you, I knew I was going to do that. I knew that it was going to happen. And I told myself not to do it, and I did it. And of course, it happened. It's almost as if we have this ability, when we're in our awareness, to predict or anticipate, and we ignore that. Sometimes we ignore that. I'm not saying accidents don't happen. Of course they do. But sometimes we ignore that and we override. We were talking before we started recording about overriding. And what you said before about taking care, I can't put my socks on this morning. What's going on? Okay, let's think. Have I had enough sleep? Whatever the question is, but taking that into a somatic experience with curiosity and with self-love and self-forgiveness, and not falling prey to comparisonitis, which is very difficult in a social media world. But just amen to what you're doing. And I just want to say thank you, because those lovely ordinary movements on Instagram keep me in fits of laughter sometimes. And I just love your contribution to the world, Brea. So thank you.
And I love yours as well. It's important. And may more people, like, if you're listening to this and getting inspired and being like, yes, like, let that energy
Yeah.
carry you through. I'm saying this to all of you listening, that same sense of like energy of like, yes, like let that be, trust yourself, trust that, yes, trust that what you know to be true, and share it in the ways that speak to you. And it doesn't have to be complex. You don't need to look like a regular Instagram model, cheesy, typical, like that. Those days are done. That's dying out.
I hope so. And I love to think the other part of this is, and this is what I also want to thank you for personally, is the collaborative, collective community that you contribute to and you endorse and you encourage and invite. I love being part of your community, and I love you being part of mine, because I think we're upgrading. I actually believe there's a spiritual upgrade taking place where we're recognizing that our own cellular network, every one of our cells is unique, and every one of our cells is individual, and every one of our cells knows it's part of a collective. And to the extent that it knows that, they all work together. And that's congruency. And when we can bring that collective communal congruency to the way we behave as if we are cells, and we recognize that there is hierarchy and there is heterarchy, there's both. There's this, we're all the same, but what makes us all the same is that we're all unique. And if we could just honor and respect that in each other and celebrate that difference, I just think, I really believe the world can be a better place. I really believe it. And I just don't think we're lost and washed up and it's all over.
No,
I just don't think that.
But and I think we can thank you, and thank you for the beautiful, kind words. And the feeling is so mutual, of course. And I think that is the key. And when you're talking about the cells and how they're all together and they work together, I'm like, my mind went, that's the anatomy I want. Like, that's the anatomy I can get behind, because in a way it's that micro to macrocosm, and that reminder. And the same with nature, ecosystems, like the outer to the inner, it's all matches in that sense. And I don't benefit when I'm competitive and try to be like, it's all me. And believe me, we are all human, and ego comes up, and like, my God, but not immune ever to that. But at the same time, then there's the beautiful moment of awareness practice where I'm like, oh, there's competitive Brie coming out, and like, this is my blah, blah, or like whatever the stories. And then it's like, wait, I do better. And my life is actually way easier when I'm collaborating, and I don't have to have this story of I have to do it all and I have to work so hard and grind. And yeah, there's God, I feel like we could talk for 5 more hours on that one, but I think that's a beautiful reminder. And thank you for that, of the cells and how we are that same story, we as a collective and we as a community. And it's an unlearning, and may our yoga practice offer more ways to also unlearn and see how we have been affected by the cultures that we are born in. And may we sort of like dismantle all of that through through this, our own, I don't want to say through our own practice as if it was an individual practice that, oh, I got on my mat and that's enough, I don't have to do anything to heal the collective, I just breathed and now it's all good. There's an active unlearning and exploration within that I think our practices and this somatic awareness and this sense of ourselves from within gives us more resiliency. So just like movement, as you gave that example with being in the car, and okay, I want to be strong enough so that I'm not going to hurt my back when I do an everyday movement. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing in our movement practices is building that resiliency, but may it also build resiliency in our ability to see the changes that need to happen in ourselves and in the world, and embody that as best we can, and mess up with it too, and not be perfect, and continue to be curious and learn in all the different ways.
Amen.
Yeah.
Brie, thank you. And so much love.
Thank you. So much love. I'm excited for diving into all of this stuff a little bit more in our course, and then really not just talking about the body, but being in it and moving from these perspectives and places. I'm so excited.
Me too. I can't wait. You take care.
You too.
So that was my lovely conversation with the brilliant Brea Johnson. And now you know why I think so highly of her. As I mentioned, we've created a transformative short course together to invite you into a new view of anatomy. It's intuitive, it's alive, it's intelligent, and it's deeply connected with the way we really move and the way we teach and the way we live. So even if you're not a yoga teacher, but you're somebody who's passionately interested in how fascia integrates form, you're going to love it, because it includes deep and insightful lessons from us both, blending the science with philosophy, with practical guidance, and gorgeous embodied movement practices with Brea that are designed to anchor what you learn into the body. It's a great course for anyone who's curious about fascia and wants to understand this incredible interface. Because for me, fascia is the interface where spirit animates the matter of us. It's the fabric of our form, and it unifies our movements and the way we move with our way of being, and it all integrates together in action. As my spiritual teacher puts it, doing does it. So you get to learn and you get to do. So whether you're a movement teacher, a yoga teacher, wanting to teach with more clarity and depth, or if you just want to move beyond rigid mechanical anatomy and into something more holistic and alive, or if you simply want to reconnect to the why behind your own practice and the wisdom of your own body, really will be reassuring. And the course is super affordably priced. It's out now and you get instant access for life with it. So you can download it straight away if you hop on over to heartandbonesyoga.com/fascia-course. That's heartandbonesyoga.com/fascia-course. Or you can just simply click that link that's in the show notes. And please do share this with anyone else you think might enjoy or might benefit from the course. And if you've got any questions, just send me an email, info@myofascialmagic.com, or DM me on Instagram, Joanne Avison. I cannot wait to hear how you find the program, and I thank you so much for joining us. And I really hope you get joy and support and juicy, usable knowledge from the course. And like I said, don't forget to send us your feedback and let us know what you got out of it. Cannot wait to hear from you.